first came up on our radar because you just come back from a trip to Africa.
Yeah, my wife and I went to Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda back in the fall of '08. My wife's on the board of an orphan care related organization, and this trip had been planned for a year. 6 months prior to the trip, I made a decision that I was going to start to try to find a way for me to put my interests and background and skills and training to use helping the poorest of the poor, so doing business in some form in the developing world. This trip came along to Africa. I had been in process of researching, okay, how will that work and where will I plug in and what will I do, so I had feelers out to friends, one of whom worked in Rwanda for Food for the Hungry. So when we were there, we visited him and talked through what was going on in Rwanda, and that's what really got the ball rolling with plugging in Rwanda, and then a lot of different pieces contributed to our focus ending up in Rwanda. And Carter will talk to that a little bit coming up, but just to emphasize, I think what Carter said earlier, and to upfront answer a question, what are we doing? What are we going to go do? We want to go and help Rwandan entrepreneurs build their businesses, specifically more targeted at mid-sized companies. And again, we'll talk to why and how, but not as consultants that write a report and leave a strategic level view on somebody's desk to think about how to implement, but more as hands-on, roll up our sleeves, get dirty, work with these guys intensely and in depth over a long period of time to help them build their companies beyond where they could be maybe without us. So if there are 30 people now, ideally by the time, if we leave in 5 years, maybe they're employing 100 people or 500 people. So that's the vision for what we want to go do there.
Maybe I should explain a little bit more about the needs that Rwanda has. Many of us, even though it's been 15 years since the genocide, still think, Rwanda, that's where genocide happened. That's where 800,000 people were killed within 3 months in 1994. Huge tribal strife. A lot of people also think, is this really a safe place to go? Is this really a good place to go? Wasn't the entire infrastructure of the country decimated during the genocide? There's a bit of that is there, and that kind of pain, and that kind of hurt, and that kind of just turmoil, even 15 years later, can still be felt. There's a legacy of that terrible time that still remains today. Other things about the country you should know, though: it's a landlocked country. It's small, about the size of Maryland. It doesn't have natural oil resources or a lot of other things besides coffee and tea and kind of lesser natural resources on which to depend. It's the most densely populated African country. And the average person that's running a business has not had an education that goes beyond 7th or 8th grade. There's 70,000 micro businesses in Rwanda right now. So these are 1- and 2-person companies, most of them getting micro loans, microfinance. But there's less than 300 companies in the entire country that employ more than 30 people. And so you can start to see, okay, if this is a pyramid that builds an economy, they're really good on the base right here. What we need now is something that can help identify, the Steve Jobs, those people that can really grow companies, that create sectors, that employ lots of people. Because microfinance can do great work and will continue to, but creating many stable jobs is not one of those things. And so a lot of people have been asking, what's the next step? Our idea is really a proposal of what the next step could be. So that's something of the need and why we're targeting this missing middle in this economy. And both based on the people that have been researching Africa and how to build up the economies in some of the poorest regions, there's a lot of the things that come up as far as pitfalls that you want to avoid. Keep coming up again and again from these experts. One of them is you don't want to go into a country where there's incredible tribal strife and uncertain political leadership. So the general that was leading the army that stopped the genocide is President Paul Kagame now. He's been in charge since the genocide, 15 years, and it looks like he'll stay elected and in charge until 2017. He's outlawed the use of the words Hutu and Tutsi. He said, we're all Rwandans now, even though I'm one of the Tutsi that was attacked in 1994, 800,000 of my people died. We're now trying to work together. That makes him a very unique African leader. He's also an extremely pro-business African leader, to the extent that he wants to sever all ties and relationships that depend upon international aid. And the way he wants to do that is by raising up his own businesses in his own economy. So that makes him, again, a very unique African leader. And another thing that makes him a unique African leader is that he's given the church a tremendous role to play. About 95% of Rwanda identifies as Christian, and he said, hey, reconciliation, forgiveness, that's the church's job. And we need a lot of it here in a country that had genocide 15 years ago. Come on, help us out. And so the church is playing a tremendous role in the vision of the president to rebuild this country at this time. And so there's a lot of people that say if you're going to try to create this new model for addressing the missing middle, for building that next step after microfinance, then Rwanda is the best place in Africa to give it a try right now. There's a tremendous amount of hope there.
When we were in Kenya and Uganda and talked to friends that were there that were business people and talked about what we were thinking about doing, they to the one said, oh, well, you should do that in Rwanda because Kenya and Uganda may have more vibrant, bigger companies and bigger economies, but they're too complicated, too much corruption, too much instability. Rwanda's a place to be if you want to try to affect change through business.
Right now, Rwanda is considered the safest, cleanest country in Africa, which, 15 years after genocide, that's kind of amazing, isn't it? It's the least corrupt, safest, cleanest country in Africa, generally, consensus is. And because more than half the politicians, the parliament is female, they're considered one of the more progressive countries in Africa now as well. And so there's a lot of things going for it. From the taxi cab drivers to the entrepreneurs like those you see pictured here, there's hope in people's eyes. And they kind of know they're on a roll and they want to give us the chance to help them succeed.
I don't know if they know they're on the roll, but they know they are at the cusp of a strategic opportunity. They're positioned with a lot of visibility, a lot of opportunity, and they realize they need to take advantage of it. And they say that if we don't, we're going to get surpassed we're going to get eclipsed by the Kenyas and Ugandas and Tanzanias and Burundis of the world. So they want to seize the day.
They're trying to rebrand the country, and President Paul Kagame is part of that. Some of the articles on the tables describe some of what he's been doing to try to nurture that. But yeah, they don't want to be known as the country where genocide happened. They want to be known as the country that was able to lift itself out of poverty faster than any other African country.
And there's potential for them to be the light to the countries around them, because they are in the center of the heart of Africa. And there's once Rwanda makes these changes, things are going to ripple effect out.
And it's small. And so people say, hey, this is a small, if we can make this a symbol of hope, if we can do it here, we can do it anywhere. And that would be a great place to start. So there's lots of great things going. How do we want to fill this gap that we've found between what the government, the church, and the Rwandans want for themselves and what they have the innate capacity to do? We kept hearing the same thing from the government. We want management capacity building. That's the thing getting in the way of our economy growing, finding these people that can grow larger companies than, after the microfinance level. And the way we want to do that isn't through doing large general training sessions. They've been doing that for a few years. Too often, people leave a large setting, they get the certificate, they go back to their office, and they don't know how to put to use the things that the government flew in a guest speaker to tell them about. And so what they've said is, to our faces, when we met with the government, they said, what we need is you guys to go and work in their offices to show them how these things make practical sense in the day-to-day decisions they've got. And to our surprise, they said, and we'll help pay you to do that until they can afford to pay you themselves. And so this is the type of thing that we've run into as we've pursued this just a little step, one step at a time, that we didn't expect. It feels like the door is being, we're pushing against an open door is what it feels like, really. So what makes us unique, I think there's a few things. We're socially motivated. If we didn't feel like God had made us to serve people like those in Rwanda that we've met, then we wouldn't be thinking about coming to Africa and moving our families to do so. We're also business-minded, which is why we feel like we've got a good shot at making a sustainable venture out of something that really is motivated by what we feel in our hearts is the best thing for us to do. And so we're a weird kind of blend of sorts. We don't look like entirely missionaries, although we have the same heart. We're trying to use what we've been trained to do here in the States. to make that heart make sense and sustain itself after year 2 and 3.